Their congressman. This is 1967. These words were written. That's after the Civil Rights Act, wasn't it, or the year before?
Well, the Fair Housing Act was 68.
68. So when you talk about this proposal, and we'll talk about the road, the connector road, extensively in this program, but when you talk about the idea of putting this connector road through Smithville, is that a holdover from what could that be written as part of this 1967 article? It's the same thought process going through here?
I would say it is. Because it seems as if, our communities, the African American communities, have always taken the blow for the towns to expand and do different infrastructure, but it falls on the black community, and that's what's happened. And it happened back then when it was called Germtown. Now it is slowly but surely getting a little better, but it's still coming as to where it does fall into the same. Because if you felt that you could put the road right through the community, that's just like you're not allowing us to get water put into our community. You're still trying to keep us oppressed.
There is a history in this country of putting interstate highways through
Yes.
African-American neighborhoods, urban renewal, destroying healthy African-American neighborhoods in the 20th century, all done for the betterment of all, in quotes, but that didn't turn out to be that way. I have the mayor of Cornelius over here. I want to give you a chance to chime in here. When the town began and you have severe traffic problems, there's no question about it.
Yes, we do.
When the town thought about ways to relieve some of this congestion, and this idea for a connector road came up, did it occur to anyone that this would be a problem with people who lived in Smithville?
It really did. We were very concerned about the reaction to Smithville during those times. But I want to go back a little bit to the 1967.
When you were not mayor.
When I was not mayor, I was in high school at North Mecklenburg High School and really experienced the closing of our two black schools up in North Mecklenburg, Ada Jenkins and Torrance Lytle. I was in high school when the desegregation actually occurred. That was the beginning of it all. I totally agree with that. Those dates are right on. We were two separate communities. I grew up in the white area, which was adjacent to that. Had many friends in Smithville because they walked by my grandma's house as I was sitting on her front porch and got to know many folks, including Ron Potts and many others. But, as far as moving forward, Smithville is right in the middle of our affluency and our old town. And that puts it in a unique spot to be in a position that can really unite our entire community.
Well, it's kind of the gateway to downtown Cornelius from I-77, and it's also, if you're coming in the opposite direction, the gateway to affluence.
Yes.
And this is a little pocket that's right in the middle of it all. Isn't there a road already going through it to I-77?
Not to my knowledge.
No,
it's 77 skirts it. Okay, so 77 is due west.
Okay.
So you have 77, then you have US 21, then you have Smithville.
Okay.
But to add on to the NCDOT issue, one thing, Smithville is 67 acres.
Okay.
Okay, so not counting roads. But with the NCDOT, one of the things that was kind of remarkable to me is, I had a couple of meetings with them, one at their office. If you look at what's required by law for them to do, they were actually going through the motions. Somehow it didn't dawn on them, even as they were going through the motions, and even as they said there would be an adverse effect on African American communities, and that may pose a set of issues. It actually never stopped them, and so the assumption was that they would, check all the boxes, do what they normally do, and then they would cut their road through and spend the money and go on to their next project.
That's why we have a toll road. Same reason. So there are a lot of newcomers to Cornelius who have no concept, why would they, how could they, of the history of Smithville, or even the history of Cornelius for that matter. So what would you tell them about, what do they need to know, these newcomers who buy a house at the lake, they move down here from New Jersey, wherever, and they move it? What would you tell them about this area from your point of view, Mayor?
Well, it's an evolving area. Growing up for me, it was a town of 1,500 people on the east side of what is now Interstate 77, formerly Highway 21. Many of us can remember when the lake was actually built, and that has changed everything for us. Matter of fact, just to throw in something very, very positive, I think we were just named the number 4 lake community in the country by MSN. It's a proud designation, I'm sure, but we've got some pockets of concern that we still have to deal with. Smithville's certainly one.
And we have a newcomer to Smithville itself, relatively speaking, one of our guests today, Willie Jones. We're going to come back and talk more about the Connector Road and the rise in activism to stop it in a moment. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Duke Energy, committed to building a smarter energy future for the Carolinas. More at duke-energy.com/future. And Novant Heart, Health, and Vascular Institute, with a team dedicated to maximizing the life of patients in the treatment of heart attacks and committed to patient-focused care. More information at novanthealth.org/doctor. No beating around the bush. Politics at the moment is a little nuts. And last week, the North Carolina Board of Elections ordered a new election in the 9th District here, while hearings revealed some surprising details. This week, former presidential lawyer Michael Cohen will testify before 3 committees, while 16 states are suing the White House over the president's declaration of a national emergency. And that's not all. Can we make sense of any or all of this? We'll try tomorrow with a bunch of political pundits on this program at 9.
Should Hollywood's biggest night have been a little smaller? Producers of the Oscars expected it to run over 3 hours. This year, with no primary host and many awards to give out, did anything make history? The statuettes, the speeches, and your reactions to the Academy Awards. Next time on 1A.
A recap of last night's Oscars coming up at 10 following Charlotte Talks with Mike Collins on 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking about a proposed connector road that we'll talk about the fate of it in a second. But the proposal itself raised some hackles, and those hackles may become the saving grace of a historic neighborhood up in Cornelius called Smithville. Pam Kelly wrote an article about it called The Fight to Save Smithville. She joins us, along with Lisa Mayhew Jones, who's the president of the Smithville Community Coalition. Willie Jones is a member of the board there, and Woody Washam is the mayor of Cornelius. That town, long not a part of Cornelius, was in fact annexed eventually by Cornelius, so it is a part of your town. Both you, Willie, and Lisa Mayhew Jones retired to Cornelius, to that area, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
No, I actually grew up in Cornelius.
Okay. And you retired then, Willie?
Yes, I retired.
From up north?
Boston.
Boston. Well, that's north. Do you live? Either of you live in Smithville proper?
No, I do not. I live in Cornelius, but my family, we still have a home there, and we have some land there in the community.
Okay. And Willie?
I live in Cornelius, maybe half mile maybe from Smithville.
So, as I mentioned, the population of Smithville has been on the decline in recent years. As you said, Pam, the population's around 200, I think. You were, if I'm not mistaken, Lisa, with the Smithville Community Coalition prior to this connector road being suggested.
Yes.
And you had been trying to do things for the community and keep the community alive and vibrant and improve the situation there. Yes. But as I understand it, you had some significant challenges and not a lot was going on until this road. What was it about this road that lit the fire?
Well, I like to just say we started the coalition back in 2011.
Okay.
When
Look,
we
and what were the goals in 2011? What were the goals?
The goals in 2011 was basically to revitalize our community, to try to get some help, to get some of the houses to be revitalized, and to actually to save Smithville, because looking at all the infrastructure going around, and we sit in the middle of Cornelius, there is a threat that, oh my, all this stuff is coming in and it's going to come straight in and just wipe us completely out. So that was the goal in 2011. It took us a while to get going. We were able to do quite a different events and partner with Habitat and different church partners and organizations, even along with the town, to get things done and try to get, but we knew that it was going to take more than just cleanups and small revitalizations to homes. We knew that we would have to get to a point where we could get some funding and get people to really know and learn about Smithville, and that's where the town came in, and we started doing Black History programs every year in February, and basically started out with know Smithville, find out who Smithville is. And there were so many people in the area that said, oh my God, I drive by here every day. I never even knew this was an issue or a problem. So just to move forward, we Willie Jones and Pam Jones moved into the area, and they were basically a godsend, because as soon as we found out about this road coming through to actually divide and cut our community and take out some homes. And we didn't know exactly which way to go, but like I said, Willie Jones stepped in and helped us get that road and what we needed to do to at least so our voice would be heard. Because I will say, the town has been by our side. We've gotten a voice, and they listen. Yeah. They come to our meetings, and they do hear us. But there's only so much the town can do, and then there's only so much, because, with the trust factor of a Black community in a town that has oppressed and not allowed and given them the same respect as others around due to, just letting it set and go away. Now we have a voice, and we're able to stand up, and we were able to get this road stopped.
So prior to the road being suggested, prior to Willie Jones kind of showing you the way, and we'll talk about why he has these credentials to allow him to be able to do this successfully in a moment, but prior to that, what were the challenges you faced? Were you not able to get people to listen to you? Were you not able to galvanize people within the actual community itself because they thought all was lost and there was nothing we can do? What were the challenges?
All of the above. Change is hard for a community that has had to basically run their own community, until it was annexed. So change is hard, and trust is hard. So it's hard for people to be able to trust a government that seems like they haven't been for them anyway. And you hear that a lot from the residents. Oh, it doesn't matter. The town's going to do whatever they want to do anyway. But I think we've gotten past that, but there's still that gray area.
There is, you've written for the newspaper here, Pam, and we've talked about development over the years in Charlotte, and the common refrain that you hear from residents is, it doesn't matter anyway because the developers are going to get their way. It's a common refrain.
Right. And I will just say that I sitting in some Smithville meetings, I heard people talk about what they had heard from some town leaders about we'll just let the market take its course. There was also a commissioner that he denies saying this, but several people, including Lisa, say that he said Smithville should just be bulldozed. This was some years ago, and He's
denied saying that.
He has denied saying that, and he now says he thinks it should be helped. But you can understand why there would be a lack of trust.
Right. We have an email from Lori who says, I'm a resident of Cornelius and am constantly appalled at how many of my fellow residents don't know about Smithville or even know where it's located. This is incredible because most of them drive past the neighborhood on a daily basis. Thank you for giving this community the attention it deserves. Smithville is important to the fabric of Cornelius and the Lake Norman area. Is that becoming a common thought among the powers that be in the town of Cornelius, or is that do you still have to do some work in that area?
I think we have work to do. It's progressing, as Lisa has said. Conversations have made a difference. I joined the meetings of the coalition when I got elected as commissioner and mayor pro tem back in 2013. That was a big learning curve for me because I didn't know they existed prior to that time. And as I've evolved forward with my level of knowledge and experience and input from a lot of folks, I think it's made a difference. And we've got to do the same thing with our residents to make their awareness step forward and have them understand what's going on here.
In the article that Pam wrote, Lisa, she said that the proposed connector road might have been built with little opposition in the past, and she quotes Ron Potts, one of your coalition's leaders, whose family has lived there for 6 generations. That's a long time. As saying that in the past, we stayed in our place. It's been whatever the town wants. Well, the town wanted this connector road, but this time you weren't having it. What changed?
You just had enough. It's got to the point where we're not going to sit here and allow them to take our community. Back when our forefathers had to build the trenches, they did that themselves. So it was a time for us to just speak up and see what we can do to stop this road. Why should we have to take the brunt of your traffic
And
problems?
at a meeting where this was discussed, a white woman stood up and she said, if this were happening at the peninsula or any other white neighborhood, this would not be happening.
Absolutely. I do agree.
That shock you?
No, it didn't.
Well, the truth of it, the truth of it shouldn't shock you. But I mean,
right.
the fact that she got up and said it, did that shock you?
No, because as that email came through, there are people in the Cornelius and Davidson surrounding areas that are concerned about Smithville, and they do want to see it stay and revitalize because it is important to the history of Cornelius.
So, Woody Washam, you're the mayor. Did the town of Cornelius approach the North Carolina Department of Transportation and say, we need traffic help, give us some suggestions, or did somebody from the town suggest a route that the NCDOT then looked at and said, yeah, we can make this work? How did it work?
Well, the route actually came from the DOT. That's the direction it traveled in, which is very typical. But keep in mind, the DOT is about moving traffic. It's our job to represent the community and do as much as we can to speak for the community. Once we heard the disconnect and the disagreements going on, we pulled back, had many conversations.
Did it surprise you that opposition emerged? Had you thought that this might not be a good idea, or did that just emerge organically as it was being discussed and people said, no, no, no?
Well, we were a little bit under the gun at that time because this was this particular project, which is the Catawba 21 project, is right at an intersection which is critically important to our community. It carries 30,000 cars plus a day.
Okay.
And, you know, me as the mayor of 32,000 people in Cornelius now, and including the Smithville community, we had to jump back and take a look at what we were creating, and we had to ask, is there a better way to do this? We go back to DOT. Our staff has been intimately involved in conversations going on with NCDOT, made many trips to have conversations with them, and we realized finally that, yes, there is other alternatives that could get us pretty close to what that initial alternative was going to create.
The town, how many commissioners voted yes for this project? All of them?
As far as I know, they did. That's my recollection.
That's my understanding. I talked to all of them, and yes, including the commissioner
who lives in Smithville.
Yes.
Explain that.
Please.
We've had difficulty understanding that concept.
But I'll add, you know, that was a powerful message to the other commissioners who voted, because it is his community. He does own property there. And, you know, our assumption was he was representing, I guess, a majority of the community.
He's in real estate, right?
He is in real estate.
That could be the answer to the question. You said that you were kind of facing a time crunch when this
Right.
came up. So they throw a wrench into your works. Why was there a time crunch? Why is there a set amount of time you have to get this done?
The bonus allocation money has a
I
clock
see.
ticking. It's a 5-year window. You've got to get the project moving and going and started. So we were pretty frantic about losing the money, having it go to another project, which with our experience in Cornelius and North Mecklenburg, DOT would have readily taken it somewhere else.
So Smithville prevailed.
They did.
How do you explain that, Pam?
I'll let Willie. Why don't you explain explain the civil rights law?
Well, it prevailed fundamentally, I believe, because people who live in the community moved. And there's a lot of reasons that you may have low voter
But
turnout.
by moved, you don't mean they moved away. You
No,
mean they took action.
They took action.
Okay.
They came to meetings, and they showed that they showed a high level of concern about what would happen as a result of this. Now, a couple of footnotes: the cutting through of onto South Hill Street down to US 21, which is what was proposed by NCDOT, the long-term effect of that and there are other cities that have had this problem. Once you cut through a residential neighborhood, what you do is you create commercial. You create properties whose highest and best use become commercial. Right. And so then what tends to happen is once you have a commercial beachhead, then those values of the properties go up. And if you're trying to do residential housing, you can't compete with the cost. Right. Okay, so transportation has had numerous effects from interstates, but more fundamentally, it has changed the residential character of many African American communities.
I want to put your bona fides out there because you're not just a guy who moved to town from Boston and got involved in this fight. You were senior vice president for a national nonprofit that builds affordable housing. You lectured at Harvard. You taught real estate investment at Tufts. You know what you're talking about. And you are kind of have taken the lead on the technical aspects of spearheading this, the coalition in their efforts to stop this road. And you wrote a paper in January of 2018 called Smithville Snapshot, in which you make proposals for the future of Smithville. Who'd you write this? It's a very impressive paper. I read it over the weekend. Who did you write this for? Was this to stop the road, or did you just sit down and we need to spell out the future and the goals of Smithville?
Well, it was before the road, and it landed with a thud, I would say. I was hoping to initiate conversation about the future of Smithville, recognizing that the forces, particularly market forces, would likely flip it. Okay, so you have a short window of time, particularly because of so many seniors in Smithville. Because the younger generations left, you have a disproportionate number of seniors. And in neighborhoods of comparable character, the flip is usually fast.
When you say flip, you're talking about gentrification.
Gentrification, the change
Yuppies
in...
come in, not even yuppies anymore, but they come in and they tear down the old houses, they put in their new houses, and
Yes.
the whole character of the neighborhood changes.
And what's unique here is that Smithville has big lots. Okay, in current subdivision development, nobody has a lot that size.
And the reason the lots are the size they are is because they were the people who originally lived there were farming.
Yeah.
They had animals, they had fields, and so they're really deep, long lots.
Yes, it was survival lots because it was subsistence farming, and they used to grow their gardens. They used to have a pig or a cow or something of that nature as part of how they lived.
Right.
Okay, so you're left with that legacy. And so I think that part of the challenge that we were looking at was that historically, those lots in comparable types of locations move very quickly. And so the fear I had was that you could have, and please forgive me, but you could have 3 or 4 people die, and you could have 2 or 3 streets change pretty quickly.
Right.
And so, having seen that in other cities, that was my worry.
But is there also given the size of these lots, they're very long, deep lots, and if you just look at an aerial view of them, it becomes fairly apparent that you could subdivide those lots, and the original owner could stay and make some money on what he sells or leases, he or she sells or leases, and you could put streets through the lots, or at least alleys through the lots to give you access. So there are development opportunities here that other neighborhoods may not have.
Absolutely, and that's part of that's foundational to the new plan that we're promoting. And so it's what you have to do. Now, if you want to pay people for their lots and pay them you can't be stealing people's land, because that's wrong. And plus, once you do it a couple of times, people
catch on.
Okay, so you have to treat people honestly.
Right.
And so part of what we're trying to do with this is to increase the density as a way of paying a market value.
We'll come back to that in a second. Willie Jones is with us. He's a member of the board of the Smithville Community Coalition at Charlotte Talks. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Willis Towers Watson, committed to helping companies and employers unlock potential and manage risk through data-driven decisions, analytics, and solutions. WillisTowersWatson.com. And Blumenthal Performing Arts, presenting trumpeter and composer Chris Bodie, who for more than 2 decades has performed with Sting, Paul Simon, and Tony Bennett. March 7th at Belk Theater. Tickets at BlumenthalArts.org. Coming up on 1A, a recap of the Oscars in the first hour, and then at 11, many elite universities have implemented policies in hopes that low-income students would attend and graduate debt-free. Harvard professor Anthony Abram-Jack has written about the group he calls the privileged poor, and he will join Joshua Johnson at 11 o'clock this morning on 1A. We will continue with our conversation about Smithville in just a moment. Stay with us.
As the Beatles once wrote, tomorrow never knows. News happening today might only matter today, or it might even be more important tomorrow. Take the long view with us. Listen to Morning Edition from NPR News.
Listen for WFAE's Morning Edition weekdays from 5 to 9 on 90.7 WFAE at WFAE.org and with the WFAE app.
It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking about Smithville, which is a little pocket community in Cornelius on the eastern side of I-77 off Catawba Avenue, which was threatened by this connector road that the neighborhood residents finally said, nope, that's not going to happen, and they were successful in those efforts to stop that road. Lisa Mayhew Jones is the president of the Smithville Community Coalition. She joins us in our Spirit Square studio with Willie Jones, no relation, who is a member of the board and also a planner. I mean, you know what you're doing here. The mayor of Cornelius, Woody Washam, is also with us, and Pam Kelly is the author. She's a journalist and the author of The Fight to Save Smithville. Let's go back to these lots that we were talking about just before the break. No one had ever thought that these lots that are very long and could accommodate additional homes, no one had ever thought about selling half the lot before you came in and made the observation that, these are larger than normal lots. So it is technically feasible for people to stay living there, maintain their own property, sell half of it, lease half of it, have somebody come in, build roads through it, build new construction on it. And that would be one way to bring in money and elevate the property values while people maintain residence, which is something many communities that face the same gentrification problem don't have an option for, correct?
That's correct. And that's one of our main principles with our redevelopment is to make sure that no one in the neighborhood's displaced, that you're able to stay. We have several different concepts that would allow you to be able to stay in Smithville and not have to leave Smithville.
When this was revealed by Mr. Jones over here, what was the reaction of property owners?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. We revealed this over some years. We got up to this point.
Okay.
We have monthly meetings the last Monday of each month mostly at Union Bethel AME Zion Church, and it's open not only to just residents, it's open to the public. Now, mind you, it has gotten technical for residents, and some of them do not understand. But we are at the point now where we are going to have a closed meeting on today that just will be residents, homeowners, landowners, so we can sit down and try to come to an agreement, which we know it'll never be 100%.
But if you begin to do it, if you subdivide these properties
Yes.
and people come in and they build new homes, that's the beginning of the slippery slope, it seems to me, because if people come in, they want their property values to rise, they want to feel safe, they look behind them, and what they're looking back in their backyard now does not look like what they just built. Developers are looking at what they just built and thinking, well, here's an opportunity over here where this other house is sitting. Are you not opening the floodgates to your own disappearance?
If I could maybe respond, you're right if you don't plan it. And one of the things that happens in cities, particularly places that have grown as rapidly as Metro Charlotte has, is that the ideas come from developers. They have an idea of how to do a development. They bring it to the town, and then they take it through permitting and seek approvals, and they build it. Small towns typically don't have a planning function. And so what ends up happening is there's nobody who has a responsibility for thinking about those types of issues within the structure of a municipal government. Okay. Part of what we brought to this was a new way of thinking. Now, the reason you have to plan it is that you've got to oversee, somebody has to oversee the development, so you're not putting in houses or creating a community where the pressure will be on the poor people to suddenly change who they are, even though they've been there for over a century.
Because in this publication that you wrote, Willie, the Smithville Snapshot, you point to areas in Charlotte like Cherry and Greer Heights, but particularly Cherry, which sounds very much like what we're talking about in Smithville,
Yes.
although on smaller lots, which a lot of the residents there were older, and as they died and the younger people moved away, it became a development bonanza, and the whole character of the Cherry neighborhood has pretty much changed. But you say that unlike Cherry and Greer Heights, Smithville can be a laboratory for broadening smart growth planning. Is that what you were just talking about?
Yes. The smart growth has to do with you've got several exciting things, well, to me in this business, exciting, where you have new forms being evolved. Look on television, there are these small houses, not that I would...
Tiny houses?
Tiny
homes,
houses, yeah. You have that, but you also have a demographic mismatch where you have people who want to own less square footage. But finding developers who produce less square footage is very difficult to do. Right. So part of what we wanted to do here was to create a program that would allow us to reduce the impediments to these different new changes that are in the market.
Does Cornelius have any zoning issues that might make that difficult?
Not to my knowledge. I think we can work with that, whatever the community asks us to do.
If you subdivide these lots and you bring in new construction, that brings more people, that brings more cars. We've just defeated the connector road designed to alleviate traffic congestion. What are you going to do?
Well, we have some opportunities I think the community is talking about right now. Our town has offered another connector road on the back side of the property into a new road that we're building, which is called Nanny Potts Lane, after former mayor, African-American female mayor, our first and only,
right.
That we're very proud
Recently
of.
passed away.
She did. But we've offered that. They initially turned it down, and I don't think we've given up on that. I think the climate in the community is different now, as many conversations have been held since then. So it's probably a matter that the coalition and others will be willing to revisit.
Explain to people, if you would, Lisa, from your point of view and from the point of view of residents of Smithville, is keeping this area intact important because of the historical significance of it, because it is an African American enclave, because it is an area of affordable housing. What's the important driving force here? What makes Smithville worth saving?
Because it's our lives. It's where a lot of them have been all their lives. And it is the historical nature of it for our forefathers and mothers that worked the cotton fields, that were afforded to get a piece of land to make a neighborhood, to go on through the lineage and heritage and to keep it. Mm-hmm. That's what's worth it. People have been beaten, enslaved. I have in my family history where one of my great-grandmother's brothers was sold, and we have no idea where he is now. So the history of our community, that's why it should be kept. We have persevered through everything that has come up around us. We'll continue to persevere, but we have to have help from the town. And just the nature that you're able to have the other new communities that have come around us and are thriving, and we are just continuing to decline, it's worth the fight. And that's what it is. It's the heritage. It's me. It's what made me and helped me become who I am. Had it not been for all the trials and tribulations of Smithville, I may not be able to sit here and try to fight for my heritage.
It is also it is an enclave of affordable housing for people, and it's also if these plans come true and you're able to subdivide these properties, it's the way people build wealth.
Yes.
Which African Americans have historically been denied those opportunities to
Yes.
build wealth through property ownership. I want you to talk, Willie Jones, about affordable housing for a second, because this is really your wheelhouse. And you've worked on affordable housing projects around the country. And Charlotte, gosh knows we have an affordable housing problem in the Charlotte region. And yet you told Pam that you had never been in another major metropolitan area that is, and this is a quote, that is this passive on affordable or on affordability issues. It permeates the culture, you say. Talk about that.
Many of the cities, well, majority of the cities I've worked in, and I've worked in more than 20 cities doing redevelopment, those cities have typically had an active neighborhood development environment. So in some cities, and the majority of those cities, they will have things called community development corporations who've taken the responsibility for redeveloping sections of the town. Mm-hmm. And so if you can imagine those, the constituency around community development corporations, to the extent they've been around, they then will begin to pose resolutions to the towns or the cities that they operate in, and certain of the resolutions will include the requirement for affordability, et cetera. So you have this pressure from the bottom demanding affordability that you don't really have here. The pressure in the Charlotte metro area doesn't have its own institutionalized constituency, if you will. So you have people who want to do things. You have, I think, some resources, and I think people are working hard to do that, but there isn't really an institutionalized framework to build on and to have those successes lead to a next generation of deeper, more thoughtful ways of doing things.
Has any of that changed? Has that opinion at all been altered by the fact that in the fall we voted in $50 million in affordable housing bonds, and that the banking and business community kicked in another $70 million, and that the faith community has been asked to raise another $50 million? Or is that separate from that? It's a whole different way of thinking that you're talking about.
Well, I think it's part of the process of growth. So people are beginning to figure out ways to do this. But the delivery vehicles are still the private sector. which is one of the Achilles heels.
And one of the things that we've talked about on this program that people are trying to do in other areas of the city outside of Smithville, but other areas like Smithville, like in Greer Heights and places like that, is to establish land banks so that the land can be protected and only used for affordable housing going forward. Are you suggesting that for parts of Smithville?
What's being proposed is a form of a land bank. Let's be honest, if you don't control the land, you really don't have much to say about what happens on the land. And so I think one of the things that towns and cities have to grapple with is, if we want affordability, how do we, over a period of time, acquire land? And I think that it's an investment. It's not just that you'll be increasing taxes, but it's an investment that makes sure that people who work in the lower income, low paying jobs have places to stay, that your public servants have places to live proximate to where they work, et cetera. That's a planned approach, but I think we have to get to that.
Not everybody, you mentioned this already, Lisa, not everybody's on board with this, and some people are, in fact, in the community suspicious of motivations and what's going on with your organization, the Smithville Community Coalition. Now, you're having a meeting this afternoon or today with property owners and people who have a stake in all of this. What do you think their suspicions are? Why would they have suspicions of you?
I'm trying to figure that out myself. I don't know, because...
Sure, Pam.
I think there's been talk, suggestions that Willie is somehow in this to make money on it, and it's been suggested to people in the Smithville community.
Are you?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I'm losing money.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that is frankly the heart of it. Suggestions from people who, or one person in particular who is respected in the community, and so that carries a lot of weight. And these are elderly people, and they usually don't come to the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of the things that I've learned through this process has been that the gentrification issue and just what we're going through right now, I thought initially it was just isolated to Smithville, but what I've learned is this is a very typical process and a thing that you go through when communities face this sort of thing. And that's been a little bit of an eye-opener to me, because I thought we were, a little more, I guess, special, and it sounds like our development and redevelopment is just like everybody else's. And
So I have a minute left here, and the Smithville Community Association was going to sue the town to stop this road. It ended up they didn't have to do that, but they were active in their protests against it. And you say now, Mayor, that you probably have a better working relationship with Smithville than ever before, and it was because they took the bull by the horns. Is there a lesson there for other communities?
Absolutely. We had great leadership in this community. There was a lot of disagreement. It was almost dysfunctional to a point, with so many opinions coming in and out of the fray here, if you will. And I'm proud of them for pulling it together and moving us forward.
Very quickly,
we've learned a lot.
Very quickly, Eric on Twitter wants to know where, if anywhere, he can get this Smithville snapshot report. Really?
We can get it sent out without a problem. If he can,
so we'll put it on. You can contact Charlotte Talks at WFAE.
Well, and I would say read my story.
Yes, read the story. Pam Kelly's with us, journalist who wrote The Fight to Save Smithville that started all of this. Lisa Mayhew Jones is the president of the Smithville Community Association. Willie Jones is a board member, and Woody Washam is the mayor of Cornelius. Thank you all for the hour.